Good evening, everybody, from the summit of Mount Washington. My name is Amy Cotter, and I am a meteorologist here at the Mount Washington today. Here at the summit of Mount Washington today, here to talk to you a little bit about what to expect at the higher summits of New Hampshire weather-wise this weekend. But before we do that, I want to highlight our upcoming Seek the Peak fundraiser. So that is our 25th anniversary, and at our 25th anniversary, we're going big this year. So that'll be at Great Glen Trails on July 19th, and there are so many different ways to get involved with that, whether it's hiking with a group, hiking solo, any trail, any day, seek your own peak, or even making a donation to the observatory. There's no wrong way to participate. You can get involved at www.seekthepeak.org, and we'll have our Après Hike Expo on July 19th at Great Glen Trails. And tonight we'd like to give a special thank you to our sponsor who sponsors both Seek the Peak and our Higher Summits forecast, Wildly Responsible New Hampshire. So Wildly Responsible New Hampshire is a statewide initiative that aims to share resources and reminders for everybody who gets out and enjoys the beautiful state of New Hampshire. So you can go to visitnh.gov Wildly Responsible to check out their website and all of the wonderful work that they do that helps support us here at the Mount Washington Observatory. But diving into the weather this weekend, let's start off with our current summit conditions. So this page right here is showing us what's going on the summit of Mount Washington right now. And there are a few things I'll point out, but I'll try to keep it brief with this page this week because it is a little bit of a dreary evening here on the summit. Our wind speeds are right around 39 miles per hour. So that 39 miles per hour is a little bit higher than our annual average of 35 miles per hour. And it should pick up a little bit later tonight. Another thing I'll point out is our temperature. So our temperature right now is right around 34 degrees. It's been a bit of a colder day up on the summit today. I'll also point out our 24-hour data right here. So our 24-hour data tells us a few things, one of which is our precipitation. So our precipitation over the past 24 hours was 0.73 inches of liquid precipitation. And if you are in New England right now, I'm sure you know that we've gotten a bit of rain so far, and we're expected to get more this weekend. So we do have some rain falling on the summit. In our visibility right now from the summit, a super interesting less than 1/16 of a mile. So that means we can basically see 0 feet from the summit today. And we can take a look at what that visibility looks like on our deck camera. Not that interesting of a view this evening on the summit. We can barely see the edge of the observation deck. You can see that wind blowing that fog around, those raindrops on the camera lens. So like I said, it is a bit of a dreary day on Mount Washington so far, but we should see quite the range of conditions this weekend. So let's dive into what to expect at the higher summits of New Hampshire this weekend. So the first thing I'll start out with is this surface analysis map. So this surface analysis map can tell us a little bit about what to expect in terms of different pressure systems and also fronts moving through. So this big red L right here, we're under an area of low pressure currently, which is what's bringing that rainy, dreary weather, all of those clouds, that kind of stormier weather that we're seeing across New England this weekend. And then if we move forward into tonight, you can see that low start to depart northeast and shift northeast of the region. And behind that low, we'll see this big area of high pressure start to build in. Between those two air masses, we have that cold front moving in, filtering in some much colder air as high pressure builds into the area on Sunday, which brings us out to the end of our weekend. So let's take a more in-depth look at what to expect with precipitation with this low pressure system that we've got overhead right now. So this map right here is a map of the United States, and you can see that this precipitation shading in green and blue colors indicates that intensity of the 6-hourly precipitation or the 6-hourly precip accumulation amounts. So let's take a look at tonight. You can see that precip moving across the state and that low pressure taking shape that we saw in that surface analysis map. And you can see that that precip does get a little bit more intense, especially Saturday morning at times. And as that low pressure shifts northeast, we're going to see this area of high pressure start to build in. It's a little bit trickier to see that H on this map with all of the lines going on. But you can see that low pressure departing northeast and that high pressure building in and tightening those that pressure gradient right there, which gives us an indication that we might want to keep an eye on winds this weekend. But let's zoom into the wonderful state of New Hampshire in terms of our 1 hourly precipitation, just so we can get an idea of when we're going to see our heaviest precip. So moving into Friday night, you can see some precip crossing the area or some widespread rainfall. And as that low, which you can't quite see when we're zoomed in this far, as that low departs northeast, you're going to see it carrying that precipitation or dragging that precipitation along with it. And then this is moving into, so this is Friday night. And then moving into Saturday morning, we'll see some periods of heavier precipitation. And as that low departs the region and that high pressure starts to build in from our northwest, we'll see that precip start to clear up into Saturday night. However, you can see there's still a few dots here and there of gray and green. So there is the potential that we'll see some lingering accumulation, especially with upslope enhancement going into Sunday morning. And then as high pressure builds into the region, that precipitation, that rainfall or snowfall, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second, should clear up as the day goes on, along with summit fog. But like I said, I mentioned snowfall, so let's dive into temperatures here at our level in the atmosphere. All right, so you can see we're above freezing currently. You can see that warmer air moving through, but then you can see these much colder colors up here that represent that, follow that cold front that we were looking at on the surface analysis map. And then you can see that cold air filtering in to the higher summits of New Hampshire. So the summit of Mount Washington is expected to drop below freezing overnight on Saturday, and that freezing line should descend to about 4,000 feet. So as we see lingering precipitation, perhaps in the latter half of Saturday night into Sunday morning, that precipitation will likely fall as a mix of sleet and snow. And then as we round out the weekend, we'll bounce back to those regular temperatures, but that is past the forecast period. So past the forecast period, potentially starting the work week with some warmer temperatures. However, Sunday will be a chillier day up here on the higher summits with about trace to 2 inches of snow and sleet accumulations on Saturday night. But let's take a look at wind speeds here at Mount Washington and at the higher summits of New Hampshire. So let's start going into Friday night. So we do see some winds picking up as we move into, didn't need to skip that far ahead, as we move through the night. Perhaps in the 50 to 70 mile per hour range as that low pressure takes shape. But as it passes nearby, you'll see those winds start to calm down, moving into the second half of overnight into tomorrow morning. And then as that low pressure departs the region and that high pressure starts to build in, we'll see some heightened winds moving into the second half of Saturday. So you can see those much warmer colors, those reds, those oranges. So we'll see some higher winds later in the day on Saturday into Sunday morning. However, as we move through Sunday, as that high pressure kind of centers overhead, we'll see those winds start to dampen by the end of the day. So all of this is synthesized in our higher summits forecast, our forecast discussion, as well as our dailies. So let's take a look at something pretty important this weekend, and that is our alert for a flood watch for neighboring ravines and notches from Friday afternoon, so this past afternoon through Saturday evening. So we're seeing really, really saturated surfaces from recent rainfall over the past few days, which could result in flooding in neighboring ravines, notches, and areas downstream. This also could affect water crossings on any trails you're planning to venture on this weekend. So it is important to note that we will get quite a bit more rainfall, and then that rainfall in those saturated conditions will freeze overnight on Saturday into Sunday morning with some colder temperatures. And then taking a look at these daily values for this weekend, we have winds ramping up overnight tonight into the 50 to 70 mile per hour range with some higher gusts before dying down as that low pressure passes nearby. Moving into Saturday, we see continued rain, possibly falling heavily at times, along with some strong winds ramping up in the afternoon as low pressure departs the region. Moving into Saturday night, we'll see those sustained winds, those strong winds in the 50 to 70 range throughout the night. Moving into Sunday, when we see that potentially lingering precipitation in the early morning hours of Sunday, and those snow and sleet accumulations Saturday night are a trace to 2 inches, and then moving into Sunday morning with any lingering precipitation we get, we could potentially get maybe a trace of snow Sunday morning. However, that does hinge upon actually getting precipitation Sunday morning, and that will likely be in the very early morning hours. And then as that high pressure builds into the region, that high crest overhead, we'll see winds dampening throughout the afternoon, but still starting off Sunday pretty strong. So that's all I have from the higher summits for you, that's all I have for you from the higher summits this evening. And I hope you enjoy this weekend, even though the first half is looking pretty dreary at both lower and higher elevations.